Hi, thanks for joining me today. We're going to be doing something quite interesting now, which is a resin pour. If you've watched some of the other videos for this project, you'll realise that this is probably one of the most crucial stages of the entire concept behind it. So this is getting resin poured, flat surface, using quite a difficult product. So we're going to get started. As you can see now, I'm got my attire on so I don't get myself covered in this horrible stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the resin. We're going to get it mixed. Now resin is, like I said, quite a difficult thing to use, and we've been through probably just about every commercial resin available in the UK, and today for this particular project we're going to be using a product which is called CER, and this is made by Chem Resins, and there'll be a link to them down below somewhere. Now they haven't given me this or supplied any of it, but I'm just giving them a shout out. Yes, I actually buy all this, ladies and gentlemen, at some considerable cost, but that's the resin that we're going to be using this morning. So what we're going to do is start with the mix. Now what you can't tell at the moment is that this room, well, you probably can actually, I'll show you there, the room is coming up to 22 degrees. So we have an optimal working temperature for this particular resin, 22 degrees centigrade. Does that see? Yes, it is. We're at 44% humidity. So I think the important thing take away here, if you're going to use resin and get it to do what you want and look really good, we found is that you need to operate at a fairly constant temperature and get the humidity nice and low so there's no moisture particles in the air. Anyway, that's that little takeaway. So yeah, it's really nice and warm in here. It's quite a small room and it's dead toasty, which I like because it's approaching winter, so it's getting cold. Anyway, so I'm now going to be doing the first part of the mix. Now this particular resin, you should mix, as it says on the side, by volume, not by weight. So I'm going to go 500 ml. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a 750 ml mix. So I'm going to, because it's 2 to 1 on the instructions, but 2 to 1 by volume, not by weight, I'm going to go 500 to 250. So the first thing that goes in is the actual resin itself. The second bit that goes in is the hardness. So this is the catalyst, the bit that then starts the reaction off to eventually set it. So I'm going to go up to 750. Now my eyes are pretty terrible, so this is where it all goes quiet. So I need to stop at 750. This should be good for a laugh, shouldn't it? 500, 7, oh, almost there, almost there. It really is. There is a bit of a tolerance, but not a massive one. What's that? 700. Hang on, don't go away. Yeah. All right, I can actually see where 750 is now. I need my glasses, really. Silly old fool. Right. Okay. So now we've gone 2 to 1 on the volume. We've got the scales as well, but on this occasion for this resin, don't need the scales. The important thing is now 3 minutes with an aerated mixer. I keep knocking that. No, that's fine. But one of the important things, I hope Eddie's counting for 3 minutes now, but that's fine. We'll just keep going. Don't worry, you don't have to watch this for 3 minutes. But as soon as you start stirring it, you get air. Now one of the things with air bubbles is not good in resin, because let's be honest, you don't really want to see air in your lovely clear casting. So I'm going to go all the way around this, for 3 minutes, because the most important thing is that both of these components are mixed together properly. And 3 minutes is pretty good. We found that 3 minutes pretty much does it. We don't have any problems with the mix. So after 3 minutes, we're then going to do something. We're going to put it in a special machine called a degassing chamber. So once I finish this and sped this up, we'll get on to the next process. Okay, that's the mixing done. I hope you're still with me. Here's a little tip we've learned. You can reuse all your tools if you give them a spray with alcohol. So this is an isopropanol alcohol, which sounds really quite grand, but it's just glorified nail varnish remover, and it's really cheap, local. So the handyman DIY store, you can buy that. So I wouldn't recommend sticking it onto the resin, But for cleaning your tools, genius. I think I've had this one about 5 months now. No point going out and buying new stuff each time. Anyway, forget the fact it's in a hair restorer bottle. That's just a nice way to pump the stuff out. Okay, we've now got, ladies and gentlemen, a mixed resin. Now there's something to bear in mind about resins when you've mixed them. Now theoretically speaking, every resin, if it's an epoxy or a urethane or even a polyester based one, is they then start to have a chemical reaction as soon as you've mixed it. Now depending on the resin that you're using, it will depend on what's called the pot life. So that's how long they stay in a usable format before they start to cure, i.e. it going sludgy, a bit like treacle, and before you really can't do anything more with it. Now this particular one, which is CER by Resins, has got a very long pot life. In fact, this is about a 4 to 5 day cure. And I prefer this because it gives us a lot of opportunity to come back and revisit and maybe readjust or make sure that everything's level and make sure everything's exactly as it should be without it going off too quickly. So for this particular purpose, the long life, very slow cure resin is the best one to use. But you can use all kinds from, I've even seen 20-minute resin casting mixes where you could literally make a paperweight in under an hour. Okay, but for this is a slow cure. So this is what we're going to do now. The next part of the process is a degassing chamber. Sounds terribly grand, I know, but actually all this does is take the air out of this pot, forces the bubbles up and evaporates them. So we're going to put this now under pressure and create a vacuum. We'll be able to see now on the video, when you come over here as we start to do that, then as the compressor sucks all the air out, then we're going to basically, I shut that valve off, we're going to now watch all the bubbles rise to the surface. And the important thing is we don't want bubbles in the resin, because bubbles are not our friends. Right, ready for the switch on. Okay, so now, you see the gauge going up, we're now sucking all the air out of here. And as we start to suck the air out and create the vacuum, the bubbles start to rise to the surface. Now this will never get rid of all the bubbles, but we'll look at how you get rid of all the rest of the bubbles a little bit later on. But for now, this will get rid of probably 95, 98% of the bubbles. And the bubbles are in there because we've been stirring it, so we're stirring air in. So this is really good practice, especially if you're casting large objects. Get rid of the air out of it, because bubbles really are bad. So as soon as that hits, well, somewhere around there, just past the minus 2.5, so we're going to be about sort of 0.85 bar. And you can even start to see now the bubbles starting to come to the surface, I hope. Let's move that over there. There we go. So that now is starting to get quite a film on the top, and I can physically see them moving now, which is good. So that's starting to suck it up. And really, for this particular resin, we could leave this probably an hour, hour and a half, and because it's a slow cure type, we're not going to get that having any more of a reaction than it looking like water as it does now. Yeah, that's really starting to bubble up now. So we'll knock that off in just a sec. That's stabilised, so I heard the difference in noise then on the compressor, so that says it can't suck any more air out. And there we go, ladies and gentlemen, we've now got what looks like a pint of clear beer with the bubbles on. So we're going to give that maybe, I don't know, 15-20 minutes. Right, that is now done. So we've degassed now for just under half an hour, and compared to what you saw, that's not bad actually. That's pretty much got everything out. It's looking really clear now. So I'm just going to let the air back into the chamber slowly, because then I need to release the lid. So any surface bubbles that are left tend to now just disappear back into the resin. So there will still be some bubbles in it, and we'll get rid of those. I'll show you how in a very short while. So we can deal with those on the surface, piece of cake. I mean, like literally no time at all. Right, so we mix resin and we got rid of the gas. As I would expect with this particular resin, there's no heat reaction. What basically happens is you get what's called an exothermic reaction with resin, which means it builds up heat in the curing process, and the heat needs to dissipate So anyway, enough of all that. This is the reason why we are here. So if you caught any other videos in this series, of which there's a couple now, then you'll see we've been making this over the last few sessions. So tune into those other videos to figure out, or to understand what this is. Anyway, today this is what we're going to be doing. We're now going to pour this resin over all these blocks. All the blocks have been keyed, so they've got a slightly rough surface. That will enable the resin to stick, because essentially now the resin's going to go into this and it's going to fall off the edges. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, when we start pouring, that should stick in all the right places. So I guess there's probably only one way to find out, and that's just to get on with it. See you all by lunch then. I know what I meant, Ed, actually is. It's great to see you in front of the camera. Are you rolling? Oh, so we actually got that bit. Right, okay, so enough of the banter. One of the things I'm doing with this particular piece is I'm putting a small, really nice metallic flake powder in it. And it doesn't need an awful lot. In fact, it literally only needs a tiny spoon, but this is just beautiful stuff. I mean, you can see the way that iridesces in the light. So that's going in. Literally, that's all it needs. This is just a personal thing. I just love this stuff, and I've done it in 1 or 2, and it looks really nice. So I'm going to be very careful. I should have done this before I stuck in the chamber, really, but it's okay. I'm not stirring that much air in, and by the time we've been through a couple of processes, you'll see that, in actual fact, we're going to be getting all the air out anyway, so the little bit that's going in while I'm stirring this is negligible, really. But it'll just give it a little bit of a shimmer. It's just one more little thing that it's just nice when the light catches it, so this is just a part of it. It's got absolutely nothing to do with pouring resin, but just part of the thing that I wanted to do. Okay, so we've got that. So we've blown this with an airline to get out most of the debris, but there are always airborne particles in everything. So despite trying to get a room that's as clean as possible, getting rid of absolutely everything is a real nightmare, and in fact it's the thing that we struggle the most with is airborne debris. So we're really trying to move as slowly as possible when the resin is on so that stuff doesn't fall on, but inevitably for an hour or two we're picking out tiny little particles, airborne particles, off the surface because you can see it in this resin. And this resin is really good, so it's a really clear, very pure surface when it's cured. So I'm really just trying to get as much of the debris out as possible. Right, okay, we're almost ready. Here we go. So I'm going to start on the centre, and I'm going to work my way out, because what I want to do is cover this and let it move. So we're going to do this in a couple of different ways, and I just want to get a coating over everything to begin with. So there we go. So let's see. Let's get poured over everything if we can. See now that the flakes look pretty nice, especially with the overhead light. Now they're really catching the light very well. I think most of the blocks now are starting to get a reasonable amount of resin over them. Now because this moves, and you can see it moving outwards as I'm pouring it on, it will naturally find its own level. So I'm going to stop there at the moment, and the reason is because on this pour now what I want to do is get rid of some of the bubbles. So particularly, and hopefully we can pick this up, you'll start to see bubble accumulation now around some of the corners. Now there'll also be scoops of bubbles in and around the resin. As this is dropping from a height, it's forming bubbles as it hits and recongeals itself. Now there are techniques to get rid of that. One of them is you can pour over a wooden spoon, and it kind of elasticizes and elongates the bubble structures so that when it hits the surface of what you're pouring onto, you kind of get rid of bubbles that way. You can also, as we do a lot of the times, put them through filters. So we got some paint filters and then modified a funnel. Just trying to get what that's called. But because this has got the flake in it, I can't put it through the sieve, the filter, because the flakes will get caught in the gauze. However, these are a really good way to catch bubbles. So there's another way of doing it. However, this is nice and straightforward. What I'm going to do now is use a heat gun. What the heat gun does, if I can reach over and get it, is it breaks the surface tension, and so it releases the air, and that's basically how the bubbles go. Right, let's get that plugged in. So now we've got it level, I need to deal with the bubbles. So we've looked at 2 ways you can get rid of bubbles, or 3 if you include the degassing chamber, but this is my favourite one. Heat gun, setting number 2, mid-heat setting, and you basically, as long as you've got an overhead light source, you whiz around that and you just literally watch the bubbles disappear. So let's have a go. We'll get it warm first. Woo. Lovely. Right. And it's just a question of going around whatever you're working on, across the whole thing, and getting rid of the bubbles. And bizarrely, you can literally just watch them pop. Now, fortunately, we don't have very many on this, which is good, but I did notice a few just lurking around some of the flat edges. Done. Now we're going to repeat that process when I've put the remainder of the resin on. So I'm now going to have a quick whiz around the corners just to help this flow into the corners, and then I'm going to finish pouring off from the centre, and then the rest of it should fill up. So we'll get some of this poured in, and because it's all self-levelling now, this should all find its way in to the corners quite happily. Again, don't need to be too precious about it. Lovely, that's looking nice. And I'm going to make sure I've got enough left over when I've filled into the centre a little bit more, because it's starting to sink in some places, just to whiz around the edges in case it doesn't hit the corners. And one of the things that we've started to do in our resin work is pour it into frames where it hits the edges and forms a bond with the edge. So what I really like about doing this is that it becomes quite seamless, and there's no sort of stop point between the base and the frame, so it all becomes one artwork. You see I'm chasing bubbles around here and there. This is quite interesting now, and bear in mind on this particular concept with blocks, this is the first time that we've tried anything like this. I can now see that some of the resin is coming out of these gaps in the centre, but you know what, that's absolutely fine. Part of this is, when you break new ground, you have to be experimental and you have to go with whichever way it takes you, but so far so good. It's looking like a solar system made out of blocks. So I'm quite happy now. It's starting to form into the corners, so we're getting the surface tension moving into itself now. There we go. So I think that probably within a minute or two is going to be the whole thing complete, and I've still got a drop of resin left over. So a 500mm sheet with a decent 1-2mm layer, 750mm of resin, and that pretty much does it. Another lick over with the heat gun, because after that second pour now I can see some bubbles starting to appear, so I'm going to have another go with that. And hey presto, they literally in a heartbeat disappear. So what I'm wanting to pay special attention to is the edges and into the corners, but I've got to say that is looking pretty good. And it's one of the benefits of using a very slow curing resin, is that you do get a lot of time to be able to correct some of the things that you need to correct. So for whatever reason, if this wasn't going into the corners very well, or an air bubble appeared, you've got time to be able to deal with it. So the only place I might want to tease it is just down the side here, so I'm going to pop a little bit up, and I just noticed in the light that the line wasn't quite even. Okay, that's better, so we'll let that sort itself out for a few minutes. You see why I put an apron on now, can't you? I can just wipe all the stuff away. Okay, so we're at just over 21 degrees, 45% humidity. So we're all looking good. Conditions are stable. The pour is done. Corners are great. We've got all the bubbles out and all the airborne debris out. So we're going to cover this now. I'll probably come back in about 15 or 20 minutes and come and have a look. Now the only reason I put the cover on is just to stop airborne particles from still landing on it while we're not in the room. And so to heat the room we have a convector heater, so we've kind of got air currents moving around, so this will just help minimise the amount of airborne debris that lands on the surface. And that, ladies and gents, is your resin pour. Woohoo! Been curing this for about 45 minutes now. We're going to go and have a look and see what we've got underneath. And don't forget, guys and girls, to give us a thumbs up and a like if you like this video, and remember to subscribe down below, because there'll be another update when all this is done and plenty more after that. So yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. There's no flat spots, the resin has pretty much stayed where it is, and what's more important, I can't see any bubbles. First day after pour, so we did pour on day 2. I'm going to have a quick look and see what it looks like underneath. So this is the first day of the cure on the resin, and got to say, really happy with that. Got a few low spots where the resin's come off, but that's fine. That's nothing that a brush on of resin can't sort out. But other than that, that's looking pretty good, and it's stabilised. Got no debris that I can see. It's really sparkly, which is great. So that is curing nicely. Now I can't hold this up for another 3 days or so. So from where we're at now, we're probably looking at Monday before that goes on the wall. But looking really good. That's day 3. Fantastic.